would like to first thank you and your audience for participating with this presentation. This planetary oceanic transport system, which we call the Aqua Terra planetary system, is in fact going to be housed in the oceans. And if I may, I will give a bit detail on this. The stations will be composed of 12 stations across the oceans. They're basically mini cities. They float. They go down approximately 800 feet, if you can picture a cone. They function basically on two basic principles. The first being a vacuum system. You may have realized what a vacuum system is, like in buildings in New York or in banks, the old banks, where you take a cylinder container and you stick it inside and it sucks it up and it goes flying into another location. That's a vacuum system or pneumatic. And then the other component of the system is the electromagnetic. This is much like the meglift trains, where they basically take an object, create an electromagnetic field, and it levitates the object so there's no friction when the object is transporting or moving. However, in the current meglift system, there is still the issue of friction from the air, from rain, from snow, from whatever activities occur in the climate. This is likely one of the reasons it's limited to approximately 200 miles an hour or so, and there are some stability issues that also come with that particular system. Now, the Aqua Terra system, as I said, will be 12 stations across the globe, connecting to each other with a large diameter tube link system, approximately 15 to 18 feet in diameter. And inside this tube links will be a cylinder container traveling that is approximately 12 to 15 feet in diameter at high velocity speed, reaching thousands of miles an hour. Once the system is together, a person or cargo at first will be able to be transported across the globe perhaps as quickly as 2 hours all the way around at 14,000 miles an hour. However, it's not necessary to travel that fast at this time. Several thousand miles per hour will be sufficient, and is the intention of this project. The international community, as far as the economic implications are concerned, we all recognize at this time that there's economic chaos, for lack of a better term, across our world. Each nation has its own issues, each problem. Each central bank is panicking to cover the losses and incurrences of business. Yet there's no single solution, simply because no demand vehicle has been funded. A demand-generating vehicle is something that we have to actually build that creates demand for employees of all types, executives of all types, engineers of all types. This is the way to get the economy going across the globe, I suspect. We must create employment. All these creative programs governments are creating do not spend money for increasing our productivity. They're being used to band-aid mistakes that were made by the banking community, the business community. The list can go on forever, laying blame on everyone or anyone. But this is not the intention here, because this economic system has its way, which is self-serving. We all understand, from the individual to a group to a nation, it doesn't seem to matter. Everyone simply is grabbing for their own interest. The alternative and parallel idea to this is the Aqua Terra system. I say parallel because this particular system is an economy on itself. It's $1.2 trillion. That's a huge amount of funds. All of us will have to participate together to make it a reality. All of us are going to be educated in engineering and science and all the other areas that will be required to manifest this idea. For now, we are looking forward to assisting the collective in turning around and creating true prosperity, not a Band-Aid approach that will last maybe the next quarter or perhaps another year or two. We need to secure our future. We need to consider and understand we have droughts, we have famine, we have a variety of issues, all of which we can solve with this idea. It will not happen overnight, but it must begin somewhere. Let us begin here. It is true that the engineering in this project is very, very substantial. Much of it will be invented and reinvented. And it will also save and solve many, many issues which we all have in regards to this particular planet at this time. The Aqua Terra project is actually no different than the space program was when we first started in the United States, where America basically put a man on the moon within a 9-year period, even though it seemed impossible. However, we all must recognize that we have a wonderful and very creative scientific community across the globe, all of which will likely participate and contribute to this particular undertaking, this Aqua Terra project. This will require many, many participants, many engineers, many draftspeople, a variety of talented individuals, all of which will collectively help us form this interesting and required idea, simply because the climate on this planet seems to be changing. There's many disputes and discussions about the cause and effects. However, regardless of what the positions are of either side, we all have to recognize, simply looking out our window, that something is changing in the climate. It does not require a scientific investigation. Just look outside, look at the glaciers and the occurrences in our planet. All of these things are likely to occur now and further in our future. In that regard, we can no longer allow ourselves to be subject to climate change and repercussions that come from such things. Now, in response to your question about the island stations being built in the ocean rather than using existing island chains or something of that type, realize that the landmass at this time is shifting. If we were to build these things connecting island to island, not only would we have the issues of the politics of each nation to deal with, it would be simply impossible to maintain a one collective system, because the system would be controlled in that way by different interests. With different interests, it is likely that the system may never get off the ground, because this is for the collective of us all, and not only for one region. And this is why that it is important to recognize that we need to build these island stations, or mini-cities, which they really are, interconnect them, and further connect them to landmass for further distribution. The financing for this project is as unusual as the project itself. Recognize that this in total will be approximately a $1.2 trillion project. Yes, trillion with a T, not with a B. There is no nation, there is no individual, no collective that has this kind of money independent of the collective to make this occur. It is therefore that we are now attempting to contact governments through this particular interview, in addition to other means, so that we may present this idea to your government leaders, who in effect will perhaps recognize the relevancy and the importance of creating mass employment for their public, creating prosperity, not only for the short term, which is generally the accepted way these days, but for a very long time, perhaps lifetimes, hundreds of years, perhaps reaching 1,000 years. This seems to be a logical approach to not only economic resolution, but also to social resolution. As far as the investment aspect of this project, it is at this time formatted in either a private placement memorandum followed by an IPO, or there is another approach that we're suggesting, and that is to collectively get all the governments of this world to agree to underwrite without any of their funds, only with their endorsement and guarantees, a public offering that will raise the funds necessary for this project. It is more likely than not the funds will be raised from Wall Street, in Europe, and other financial locations in order to facilitate the needs of this particular undertaking. The time frame of this is likely to be 18 to 20 years from the time we begin. The first phase of this project will require a substantial completion of the R&D. Realize that we are building these in the oceans. There's many considerations for the environment, for the oceans themselves, and for the limitations that may be presented by such body of water. Now, as far as the governments are concerned in participation, we would naturally want everyone to participate. And this will follow through an indication of interest as we will be asking for in the future. The specifics of this financing may entail the endorsement of governments, raising the funds using that endorsement. In addition to their participation, every nation that agrees to this project will participate in revenue flow. Realize that this is not only a humanitarian project, it is also a business venture in an economic recovery or enhancement program. The reason this is because there will be no less than 12 to 24 nations involved in the construction of these Aqua and Terra stations, perhaps even more. And as these nations are involved in the construction, there's a great deal of education. There's a great deal of technology that will be brought forth to each of these countries. And at the end, we will all have constructed a complete system where we all benefit, participate, and more importantly, have a safe haven if there's climatic cataclysms on this planet, which have occurred before. I'm not projecting that one will occur again. However, history has shown that this is a common occurrence. So at this point, it may be very wise for us to consider living with no more droughts, no more famine, no more limitation of no water, no food. All of these things we can actually create. And we can do this on these Aqua stations and Terra stations. The shipping industry is very, very significant in the economy of today. Some of you may be aware that 80% of the world trade is conducted through this mechanism. The shipping industry has been long for ways to lessen their security and lessen their exposure to the oceanic changes. There's a great deal of oil spilled from these tankers. There's cargo that falls overboard. Insurance premiums are prohibitive. All these factors are combined. We have pirates who are now taking cargo from ships and taking the entire ships. All of these things are part of this particular system that we have, with no judgment or criticism. However, there is an alternative, and the alternative is the Aqua Terra project, simply because these containers that fly basically through these cylinders, tube links, will in effect be inaccessible to anyone, anywhere, except in this system. It's completely safe and will be environmentally extremely friendly, simply because this is the first consideration, is the environment and the continuation of all of us as a human race, perhaps. The idea that these stations will be serving us goes without question. The engineering and research that will be done to complete these stations will in effect give us opportunities to debug future space exploration, because we recognize we'll have to build dwellings and shelters and self-sufficient environments. That's what the Aqua Terra stations are about, is self-sufficiency without any further contamination of this planet of ours. Everything must be recycled and processed so it's not contaminating. We all are affected by anyone's contamination, regardless of where we live in this planet. It is very, very important for us to recognize that diminishing or reducing pollution standards or percentiles of pollution into the air is not logical. We still pollute. If you pollute 1% rather than 2%, you're still polluting. And we are not here to tell nations not to do what they need to do to progress at this time, because we all know that this is the only thing we have at this time. And in that reality, we now have an opportunity to build something new, something parallel, not actually new, parallel to this system, so that no more contamination, no more environmental damage is done, since we have seen and continue to see there's climatic changes, and it's very unlikely that it is by accident. My message to respective governments, as far as this project is concerned, is to go to your leaders, the national leaders who are now in power. Present this idea to them. Allow them to understand the significance that this will bring to this nation and all of the nations involved. This is not a dream, if you will, even though dreams are the first step of manifestation. In this situation, we must have the cooperation of all the governments, if possible, or as many as possible, simply because we, as a human race, deserve a future. And based on the present conditions and present situation and the ways of this so-called economic system, it is very self-serving. Not in criticism and judgment, it's simply an observation. An alternative perhaps may be this Aqua Terra project, which is basically based on economics. Economics is the idea of a collective, which is all of us on this physical plane, working in the same direction and no longer perhaps working in self-interest. I do recognize that there will be opposition to this project, perhaps by those who are in power, perhaps those who do not wish to lose any power or recognition. But please understand that even they will come to realize that if only they survive a cataclysm, there'll be no one else to do anything. And since they are so well versed in the ways of the world, it may be challenging to continue. So for that regard, we as a collective must consider building this now, beginning now, because none of us know the future in fact. We can speculate, yes, but not in fact. And because of this, and because of our state of observation at this point, we must do something for ourselves as a collective and build the safety feature and safety net to secure us now, tomorrow, and all of the generations that follow for hundreds of years. We deserve this. We need your assistance. Without it, I do not feel that this can be done. Thank you very, very much for your time, your consideration, and response in writing in some way to participate with this project. Thank you very, very much.